Gita verses booklet handy. Okay, let's start. Karpanidosho bhavatasvabhava pruchami tvam dharma samudacheta yachreyasya nischitam bruhitan me sishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tata devantara prapte dhirastatra namuyati neha vikramanashosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat dhyayato vishayam pumsa sangaste shubhajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammoha smriti vibramaha smriti pranashat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati yajnatat karmanonyatra loko yam karma vandanaha tadatam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samacharaha yadyadacharati shreshtas tattat evetaro janaha saya pramanam kurte lokastat anuvartate Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Guna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahabhatma Vidyena Minavayinam Saevayam Mayatevya Yoga Prokta Puratanaha Bhaktosi Me Shakacheti Rahasyam Hietar Uttamam Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Sunichaiva Svapakecha Pandita Samadarshinaha Bhottaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Shuhritam Sarvabhutanam Yadva Mam Shantim Vrikshati Yoginam Api Sarvesham Madhvate Nantaratmanaha Shradhavan Vajate Yoma Same Yukta Tamo Mataha. Let's read the translation for this verse alone. And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me, yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Thank you all for coming, despite having holidays from your work. Usually, we turn towards God only at the time of difficulties. So by coming to attend these classes, you are sending a statement, a strong statement to the Supreme Lord, that even in times of enjoyment, we still remember you. There are many verses in the Vedic scriptures. They say there are about 1 billion verses in entire Vedic scriptures. Rigveda, Sama, Atharvana, you take Puranas, you take Itihasas, all of them put together. But there's one verse that's given as the master of all these rules, master of all these regulations. Smartavya satatam Vishnu, Vishmartavya najatuchit, sarve viti nisedyasyo, yete eva kinkara. Always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. This is the topmost of all the rules, and every other rule is supposed to be subservient to this particular rule. So the whole point of this practicing Bhakti Yoga is to constantly remember the Supreme Lord 24/7. So every time we have some difficulty, we can always remember this verse. And somehow if we can push our mind towards remembering the Supreme Lord. When they asked this question, what does it mean to remember the Supreme Lord? We thought
we are done with the yoga style meditations, we are done with all the postures. So what does it mean? And Prabhupada actually writes in 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we'll be discussing, where Prabhupada says, remembering the Supreme Lord means to chant Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada kept it very, very simple. So the more we chant, the more we will be able to remember. Just like if I was giving this example, if I tell you a name of a person, immediately that person's memory springs up in your mind. So same way, if we keep on chanting Krishna's name, we'll be able to remember him more. 10:15. Let's get started. Second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So if you take the summary booklet, Appendix 6, today we'll be covering the first 30 verses of the second chapter. So more doubts, 2.1 to 2.10. So just a quick recap. We saw how in the last chapter, Arjuna, he gave a series of reasons and they were all justified also. We were discussing how from morality perspective they were all perfectly justified. And then Arjuna dropped his weapon, Gandiva, at the end of the chapter and he says he won't fight. Do any of you remember what the bow, Gandiva, represents? Determination, sweet. Okay, and we also saw how, so he drops this weapon saying, I won't fight. And then he hears the entire Gita, and we also saw in the 18th chapter verse where he comes to the conclusion after hearing Gita, Harishya Vachanam Tava. I will not only fight, but I'm prepared to do any instruction you give me, prepared to follow any instruction you ask me to do. Okay, we also saw how Bhagavad Gita, it takes a real life situation and then it applies philosophy there and it gives us a universal principle, universal solution which you can apply in unlimited situations. Okay, so that's how the first chapter ended. So this second chapter, Arjuna will continue to express some of his doubts regarding his feeling that we should not go ahead with this war. Okay, so he's going to give few more reasons why he should not fight. That's what we are going to cover in the first 10 verses. And in section B, Jnana 2.11 to 2.30, where Krishna will actually start to speak Bhagavad Gita. Remember, Krishna has already uttered something in the previous chapter. Okay. Behold, Partha, all the Kurus assembled here. So that is his first utterance of Bhagavad Gita, but is Krishna's actual instructions of Bhagavad Gita starts from 2.11 onwards. According to Jiva Goswami, one of our 6 Goswamis, Krishna's instructions start from 2.11 and it finishes at 1866. Okay, throughout. And you will see Arjuna's stance, especially in regard to executing his duty, actually change in 10th chapter itself, actually. It will start gradually, but in 10th chapter, Arjuna will say, yeah, you are the Supreme Lord, which means he implies to him that I'm ready to fight. So technically, Arjuna's illusion is dispelled by 10th chapter itself. Nevertheless, Krishna still continues to give him more knowledge about him, more knowledge about devotional service, more knowledge about material world. And then Krishna concludes in 18th chapter. Okay, so it's not Arjuna was an illusion for all, for the entire Gita. He wasn't. By 10th chapter, he was clear. He himself will actually admit. Okay, and in 1866, so Jiva Goswami, he says from 2.11 to 1866, that's Krishna's instruction. He also says one interesting point, that the underlying theme of all of Krishna's instructions sandwiched between these two verses is Ma Suchaha. Ma Suchaha means do not fear. So which means practically for every verse, you can just add this line, Ma Suchaha. Okay, do not fear. Okay, so that's what it means. So today we are going to cover these 30 verses. Now if you go through these verses, especially from verse 215 to 230, the first impression we will get is the verses are repetitive. Okay, it talks the same thing over and over and over again. Initially when we read Prabhupada's purports, we come to this impression, Prabhupada is telling the same thing over and over again. Now you know who started it. When they raise this question to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada answers that repetition means that it's important. Okay, to emphasize on the importance of something, the same verse is repeated over and over again. And in Vedic convention, if the same instruction is repeated 3 times, it's very, very important. Kalau nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gatiranyata, or Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Vagalam. It's not a typo. Okay, so it was said with a purpose, because if anything is said 3 times, it means it's important. It means the importance, or rather the emphasis on that cannot be stressed enough. That's what it means. Okay. So Jnana 15 to 30, we'll quickly skim through. I will highlight wherever we need to spend a bit more time. I will actually do. But otherwise, we are going to spend most of our time from 2.1 to 2.15, and then we'll quickly skim through the remaining half of the first half of the second chapter, and then we'll touch on, as I said, at least on the definition, according to Vedic perspective, definition of what are the different components of our subtle body, our mind, intelligence, ego, and obviously soul. Okay. All right. So let's start from second chapter. So second chapter starts with Sanjaya's meta conversation again. Remember, he's still seated in Hastinapur. Seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words. As I said, wherever a special name for Krishna is used, wherever a special name for Arjuna is used, please try to understand the significance of it. Okay. Text 2. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets but to infamy." Krishna uses this word anarya. Arya means one who bases his life on self-realization, which means his whole lifestyle is centered around self-realization. Anarya is just the opposite of that. So Krishna is saying, if you are really interested in your self-realization, then you have to stick to your duty. And what's your duty as a warrior is to fight. So if you say, I won't fight, which means you are proving that you are not an Arya. So Krishna uses this word anarya, not an Arya. There is no gap there. It's anarya. Anarya means no self-realization. So this word Arya is used very often, and it gets confused also. Quite often, Arya is not a caste. Arya is not a position in the society. Arya is simply a qualification which anybody can acquire. Whoever who bases his lifestyle on self-realization, he is called as an Arya. Let's move to the next verse. And then Krishna starts to list the effects of him running away from his duty. Krishna says, "O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotence." Now, Kshatriyas, to give you a history there's an instance when there was a war once between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and during the process, Karna, he hurts Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira is wounded badly, so he is brought back to the camp, and the war is still going on. And Arjuna is fighting his opponent in some other part of the battlefield. As soon as Arjuna came to know that Yudhishthira Maharaj was wounded enough to be taken back to the camp, he immediately comes driving his chariot to the camp just to understand the situation with Yudhishthira Maharaj's help. When he comes in, Yudhishthira says, "Have you conquered the enemy?" Then Arjuna says, "No, as soon as I heard about your getting hurted, I immediately rushed back just to see, to know about your well-being." Yudhishthira Maharaj, because he is ashamed of him getting wounded, he then chastises, he just vents his anger on Arjuna, telling him, "What's the use of your Gandiva? Throw away your Gandiva." Gandiva is Arjuna's bow. He says, "Throw away your Gandiva. What's the use of you holding it?" Arjuna previously had taken a very unique vow. His vow is, whoever asks him to drop his weapon, he'll kill them. What a terrible vow. Bhishma. So he has taken the vow. As soon as Arjuna hears that, he drops the weapon, picks up his sword, and he was ready to actually kill Yudhishthira Maharaj. And guess who enters there? As usual, Krishna. Krishna stops Arjuna and he tells him, "Look, you are Kshatriyas. For Kshatriyas, defaming is more hurting, more effective than even killing the body. If you kill the body, you can't really seek vengeance here. So better what you do, you go to Yudhishthira Maharaj and to chastise him with all unkind words. So then he goes back and he says that's worse than killing him. So then Arjuna goes, drops the weapon, goes, chastises him. He vents out everything and then he touches his feet also finally. Sorry bro, like that. to keep up with this wow. Okay, now this is Arjuna. Guess the word what Krishna is actually using here to provoke him? Impotent. Oh my goodness. Okay, for somebody to ask him, please leave your weapon down, Arjuna was ready to kill. How much more anger would Arjuna be provoked with? And yet, see what Arjuna says? It's okay. That's why we saw he was put in illusion, which means he was brought to our state. We are in illusion state, so he was brought to our state. So here we can see the word which Krishna uses, O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. For a Kshatriya to hear this word as being called as impotent, it's very hurting. But still somehow Krishna is trying to provoke him to make him fight. So Krishna uses harsh words here. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of enemy. Okay, now from 4th verse till the 10th, you will see Arjuna refuting Krishna's instructions. So Arjuna said, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counteract with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? Now, reason why Arjuna is using the word Madhusudan in this verse is one of Krishna's ancestors' name. Krishna comes from Vrishni dynasty. One of the ancestors of Vrishni, his name is also Madhu. So Arjuna is rhetorically using this word, saying, hey, by the way, you are called by this name Madhusudan. I thought you got this name because you killed somebody. Madhusudan means Krishna also killed a demon by name Madhu. Looks like you acquired this name by killing your forefather Madhu. Because that's what Krishna is now urging Arjuna to do. You get the point? Krishna is asking Arjuna, go and kill your forefathers, grandfathers, grandsons, everyone, your whole dynasty. So Arjuna is refuting that by calling Krishna as Madhusudan, implying, looks like you acquired this name Madhusudan, looks like you have killed your forefather, that's why you got that. Understand? So he is also using a rhetoric response there. It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of lives of great souls who are my teachers. Krishna tells Arjuna, fight. Arjuna says, I have an idea. What about begging? I can just give up everything and I can go beg in the forest. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains, generally there are 4 orders in the society: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. Brahmanas are the intelligent class. Kshatriyas, they are the warrior class. They are supposed to protect. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, they are the administrative class, and Shudras, they are the laborer class. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam also explains that even though this is their usual job description, there are instances where a Brahmana can act as a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya can act as a Brahmana also. Okay, there are exceptions. However, one exception which Srimad Bhagavatam itself wants should never be followed by Kshatriya is begging. Why? Kshatriyas, they are usually very chivalrous. Their ego is more. Okay, they want to show off their prowess. Imagine Arjuna goes knocking. Somebody opens the door and he says, Bhiksham Dehi. And he says, get up, you scum of the society. Guess what Arjuna is going to do? He's going to thrash him to death. So Bhagavatam wants clearly Kshatriyas should never go to begging, ever. It's the same way, some instances it's given, Shudras also can do yagya, but they should never utter any mantra. Mantras are given only to Brahmanas. But they can offer oblations. So there are some exceptions that are given. But one exception which should never be experimented is a Kshatriya going door to door knocking or going and asking for bhiksha, asking for begging. Because in begging, Krishna himself advises, some people will glorify you and they'll give you, some people they'll just shut the door at your face. So it's not something to be experimented with. Now Arjuna, even though he's well versed in scriptures, he's saying, I would rather follow such an awkward position of me going to begging than to fight. Just like Krishna is using extreme words to provoke Arjuna, Arjuna is also saying, I would rather go for that extreme than to fight. Okay, let's move on. Nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we killed the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live, yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, 7th verse is very important. Now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. Prabhupada has given a lot of lectures on this particular verse. Even our acharyas have also given very detailed commentary on this particular verse. Let's take some time because it's very important for everyone, especially followers of Krishna consciousness. Few things to notice here is Arjuna himself is admitting that he is miserly. Miserly means who is a miser? Someone who has this big crate of wealth hidden somewhere in his house or maybe in the backyard, whose location only he knows, but he never uses a penny out of that, neither for doing good for himself nor for the society. So someone who has access to so much wealth and yet he doesn't make use of it, that person is called a miser. So here Arjuna is saying, I have all this knowledge. I have attended Gurukul, I have studied all the scriptures, I know what my duty is, I know what I am supposed to do. However, there is still something inside me that's pulling me down. Okay, all of us go through this experience, okay, especially early in the morning when you want to come out of your quilt. I know spirit is willing, but the body is weak. So we all go through these situations even in our day-to-day lives. So many situations where we know what is the right thing to do, where we know we are capable of doing, and yet we don't do. Why? Because we are attached to doing things in a certain way, because we are scared to face the consequence of doing the right thing. So Arjuna is understanding that he is miserly. However, Arjuna doesn't stop there. He goes one step further. And he is telling to Krishna, I surrender to you. Now that's the difference between a normal person and a devotee. Devotee also go through periods of weakness. Devotees also go through difficulties. Normal person also goes through difficulty. Normal person also will find in the situation being miserly. However, devotee, as soon as he understands that there is something wrong with his life, immediately goes and takes the shelter of the Supreme Lord. Goes and takes shelter of Guru. Goes and takes shelter of fellow devotees. Now, question that may be asked is, Arjuna and Krishna, they both are related as cousins. They both are related as friends. And they both are eternally also related. We saw how they were Narayana Rishi, eternally still residing in Badrika Ashram. Why should Arjuna tell to Krishna, I am surrendered to you? Why can't this conversation of Gita happen on the level of a friend, or on the level of a cousin, or on a level of a, let's say, well-wisher? Versus, why should it happen in the position of the disciples? Acharya's comment, Prabhupada also beautifully explains there that you may go through some difficulties, you may have a chat with your friend, but you are not obliged to follow everything whatever he says. You still hold the control. Okay, you can be friendly. There are, any day, if you go and ask any suggestion to your friend for any problem you have, they may tell 10 different solutions. You brush aside. Sometimes you may accept everything, sometimes you may reject, sometimes you may partially accept, partially reject. So you still hold the mantle. However, if you actually go to a guru and accept him as the guru and tell to the guru, I surrender to you, what it means is no more friendly talks. Okay, we are seriously going and approaching the person and saying, I am your disciple, please tell me what am I supposed to do. And whatever you tell me, I am simply going to do. That's why choosing guru is a big step in one's spiritual life. Very, very big step. Because to be able to put ourselves totally at the disposal of a person, we should first be 100% sure who we are actually approaching. That's why we should never rush to take shelter of a guru. We should allow that relationship to grow naturally. And the best way, Indrajit Maharaj once in initiation lecture, he said here, that the relationship between a guru and a disciple, it develops through the years. So the best way to identify who our spiritual master is by simply hearing the instructions. Everyone is taking the same instruction, but among all of them, there will be one person who we will be 100% sure. Yes, whatever he says, since will be 100% of the time. I can put myself at the shelter of such a person. Such a person should be accepted as one's guru. So same way, something which you can go and ask a suggestion from a cousin, you still hold the mantle. I may or may not accept it. Same way, as a well-wisher, I may or may not accept such person's suggestion, instruction. However, when we go to a guru and say, I'm your disciple, immediately what we are saying is, okay, let's take our relationship to the next level, a bit more formal. You are the guru and I'm your disciple. I'm simply going to follow whatever you ask me to do. No matter what, no questions asked. That's what it means. So that's why Arjuna wanted to tell this message to Krishna. We both are friends, but from now on, you are my spiritual master. Now one question or one misconception about Guru is, we can ask questions to the Guru for clarification, not in a challenging mood. When we go to the Guru, we can ask, and you will see, Arjuna himself, he has spoken quite a bit of verses. We saw close to 75 verses. And when Arjuna is not clear, he will express his doubts, saying, please clarify this. Your statements are slightly equivocal. Please tell me. But never does he actually challenge. Like sometimes Krishna says, many words you and me have taken. I remember all of them. You don't remember. If you see in 4th chapter, we will see even Arjuna's approach of asking that question. Because just like, imagine one day morning you wake up, your brother or sister comes to you and they say, you know what? You and me are brothers and sister, or brother and brother for such a many words. I remember all of them and you don't. By the way, I'm the one who created Brahma. We'll naturally laugh like how we do now. But if you see how Arjuna responds to such a statement of Krishna, it will be interesting. Arjuna says, you and me are contemporaries by birth. However, this is what you mentioned. How am I to understand that? You understand how he's questioning in a very dignified way, without losing his position as a surrendered disciple, without removing the position of Krishna from the position of the Guru. He says, how am I to understand? Completely expressing his inability to understand such truth. Okay, so it's extremely important that we understand this mood of Arjuna. Here is a person who is a universal celebrity, we saw. However, he is confused. And Arjuna is saying, this is the mode with which we are supposed to go and approach a spiritual master. This is the mode with which we are supposed to take shelter of a spiritual master. I can find no means, this is verse 8, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. This verse is such a big challenge to materialistic conception of life. Why did I come to Australia? Definitely not to become a Hare Krishna monk. Okay, I came here to earn money. I came here to settle peacefully here. What was the drive to actually think that way? Because I thought, if I have money, I can be happy. Money equal to happiness. This is our conception. However, here we are talking about somebody whose prowess we touched on last week. He is saying something interesting. I'll read this again. I will not be able to dispel it, even dispel what? The grief which is mentioned in the previous sentence. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth. Which means Arjuna is saying, this is not true. He's saying, even if I win, unravel the kingdom, I'm still not going to be happy. Something is really wrong with me. Or something is really wrong with this conception. Arjuna has figured out. Because one of Arjuna's name is Dhananjaya. Dhananjaya means one who has conquered and acquired a lot of wealth. Dhana is wealth. Jaya means victorious. So one who has conquered and acquired so much wealth. He's saying, I don't find any other means to drive away this grief. So, he's still justifying the previous line, previous verse which he said, which is, I am a soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. Okay, this is the mode with which we are supposed to approach the spiritual master, approach the scriptures. I'll touch on it later, how to actually read Gita, but basically that's the mode. When we approach Bhagavad Gita, we are approaching Prabhupada, we are approaching Sri Radha Gopinath. That's the mode with which we are supposed to go. It's not a knowledge acquiring exercise. To read Srila Prabhupada's books, it's not. Knowledge, that's a byproduct, definitely. You will memorize some verses, you will acquire some facts, it will remain stored in your memory, you can remember it, that is true. That's an intellectual benefit that you actually get. But Bhagavad Gita can actually give us something much, much more deeper. It can transform our lives. It can become part, the principles of Bhagavad Gita can become part of our value system. Can clearly define who we are, what we actually stand for, what are our priorities in life, everything. Okay, so this verse especially, 2.8, Arjuna challenges the materialistic conception. That 2.9, again, the focus shifts to Hastinapur. Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Again, why is Krishna is being addressed as Govinda here? Go means senses. Govinda means one who gives pleasure to the senses. Now that he has taken shelter of Krishna, he is telling to Krishna, I am surrendered to you. Now you are Govinda. Please tell me how my senses can be pleased. In other words, how can I be happy? So that's the significance of Arjuna using the word Govinda in this verse. Gone are his rhetoric statements. Remember, just a few verses before he said Madhusudan. Now he is clearly taking a humble stance and he is saying, oh Govinda. Okay, you are known as one who gives pleasure to senses, pleasure to cows. Here is my mind. In Vedic jargon, mind is also considered as one of the senses. Okay, subtle senses. But Indriya means it includes everything. Indriya, that's the word that's given to address senses, Indriya. But Indriya also refers to gross senses, which is seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, everything, as well as subtle. The subtle senses includes mind, intelligence, and ego. All three of them. Okay, so Indriya here. Now Krishna gives pleasure to everything, including the soul. Okay, so Krishna is being addressed as Govinda here. And that 10th verse says, O descendant of Bharata, who is he addressing? Who is Sanjay addressing here? Dhritarashtra in Hastinapur. O descendant of Bharata, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. So the next 20 verses talks on the aspect of jnana. Jnana means knowledge, knowledge of soul, knowledge of who we are, knowledge of reincarnation. Krishna also slightly touches on atheism also in verse 226. Okay, 2.11. Sri Bhagavan Vacha, as I said, we'll go verse by verse until 15, and then the remaining half of jnana we'll quickly skim through. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Now, one point to support Arjuna's stance. In 146, end of chapter 1, if you see, there also Arjuna said, I will not fight. Remember, dropping Gandiva. If you look at this verse, 2.9, what is Arjuna saying? Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight. But there is a difference between Arjuna's utterance of I shall not fight in 1.46 to 2.9. Both the times he is actually saying, I shall not fight. However, in 1.46, he is just saying because that's his emotion. Okay, emotion is actually gushing out and he's saying, nah, I'm not going to fight, he's dropping. He's giving valid reasons, but all the reasons were based on his own misconceptions, his own understanding of life. We saw an understanding of who he is, what his duty is and everything. Whereas in 2.9, the mood changes quite drastically. In 2.7, remember, he has accepted Krishna as his guru. And in 2.9, he is saying, I shall not fight. How can you go accept somebody as your guru and go and tell him, by the way, I know what you're going to tell me, convince me, but I'm not going to do it. No, that's not what Arjuna means here. Okay, if we go that, then Arjuna himself is contradicting his position, what he did in 2.7. There's no need for him to move from the position of a friend to that of a disciple. Okay, so when Arjuna says, I shall not fight in 2.9, Srila Prabhupada explains, at this point, his mode is, see, I'm confused about my duty. I'm not going to fight until you convince me, until you clear me of this misconception, until you clear me of this illusion. Okay, till that point, I shall not fight, terms and conditions apply. Which is, until you clear me of my doubts, I'm not going to fight. You see the difference between 1.46. When 1.46 he is like, nah, forget it. I'm not going to do it. Oh my dead body. That's his mood. Whereas in 2.9, his mode is, yeah, I'm confused. I've already accepted to you that I'm confused. I've already accepted also you as my guru. Now until you clear me of this illusion, I'm not going to fight. So he is ready to receive instructions from Krishna. Now Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately he takes the role of a guru. One of the meaning of the word guru means heavy. Even in Mridanga, if you bang it loud, that's guru. Opposite of guru is lagu. Lagu is light. So in Mridanga, if you play it light, the small side, that is the lagu. Guru is like you bang. So that's guru. So one of the meanings of the word guru is heavy. So Krishna is immediately assuming that position as the guru and he is chastising him. You are talking big words, but when it comes to following it, you do the exact opposite. 2.12. This is a very important verse. Prabhupada elaborates on in the purport based on Ramanujacharya's commentary. We'll go a little deep in this purport alone. This verse, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Okay, let's touch on the signs of soul. Changing body picture. So in the middle of your Bhagavad Gita book, this is one of the most famous pictures of Bhagavad Gita. All of us know. In this, the body keeps changing, and we can also see when the person dies towards the right corner of the right portion of the picture, he gets born again, and again the same cycle continues. The whole body keeps changing, but the spark, that is the soul represented in this picture, it doesn't change. Now, few things to note in this picture is the body keeps changing. Even modern science, Prabhupada actually says that every cell in our body, including the brain cell, dies and you get a brand new body every 7 years. So every 7 years, every cell in our body will have changed. Which means you take the current composition of your body, after 7 years you take the composition, none of the cells you have now would remain after 7 years. So every 7 years you literally change your body in this life itself, including brain cells, which is interesting. Let's say our memory, if it's stored in the brain, I remember studying in biology, as many convolutions as there are in the brain, to that extent our memory is bigger, proportionately. But interesting, the cells are also getting changed. However, we don't become afflicted with amnesia every 7 years. We still remember, we still feel exactly the same personality that we are. So that's very interesting. But every cell, including the brain cell, changes. So we get a brand new body once every 7 years. But if you look at it, we used to be like this cute little baby. And then as one who is crawling, and then as a toddler, and then in our youth, some of us, we may be in the, past that youth, some of us may be before the stage. However, we ourselves, if you look at the picture, some pictures, when you are looking younger, you look more beautiful. And you think, hey, I was looking very cute then. But what happened to that body? So even in our life, if we analyze it, we can clearly see we have changed our body. I still feel the same person that I am, but what happened to my body? It changes. So Prabhupada often uses this beautiful picture to explain, just like how our body changes, we are also at the time of death, just like in this life itself, every 7 years we keep changing. At the time of death, the soul understands this body is no longer going to be useful to me. So it drops, moves to the other brand new body. So Prabhupada says, so what's the difficulty in understanding this? Very simple philosophical point, but it's so simple that we'll miss it. That's the problem. Prabhupada said one of the biggest difficulties in understanding Krishna conscious philosophy, it's not its complexity, but its simplicity. It's so simple, but we miss it. Okay, so this is the first instruction which Krishna is giving. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in future shall any of us cease to be. Now Prabhupada, you would see in many places, uses this word called Mayavad. We'll come to that later. So, first instruction of Krishna is, we are not the body, we are the soul. And the soul, it changes to another body, or rather moves to another new body at the time of death. So this is the first instruction which Krishna is actually giving to Arjuna. Now the poet Prabhupada touches on Mayavad. Now you will come across this term very often in most of the poets of Prabhupada. Let's understand what Mayavad means. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, we are his part and parcel, which means Krishna is in Goloka Vrindavan. Let's say Krishna is here also in North Sydney. From there, we are all these minute souls that Krishna created, and then we all descended to this earth. So from there, let's say, we have moved here. Now Krishna is still here as the original person. As the creator, he is still there. However, all these souls, they emanate from him and we move here. Krishna says, Mamai Vamsa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Krishna carefully uses the word, each and every soul, they are my part and parcel. There is a difference between brothers. Part, when you call something as a part and when you call something as part and parcel, there is a difference. For example, if you take this marker, you take the cap is part of the marker. Okay, so that's the usual definition of this piece set, which means this used to be one with the marker, it came out. However, on its own, both of them, they are incomplete. This is without a cap, and this cap is without a pen, without a marker. Okay, so when we call something as a part, there is a whole. When you call something as a part, the part separates. This is incomplete and that also becomes incomplete. This is incomplete, that is also incomplete. However, when we call something as part and parcel, from one comes two, however, both are self-sufficient. Both are still complete. Do we have an example of that in our material world? Yes. You take a pregnant lady. She gives birth to a baby. Baby is complete. Baby came from the body of the pregnant woman. And the lady, mother also is complete. That is part and parcel. Just like how a baby is born from a pregnant woman, same way we are also born from the Supreme Lord. Which means, just because a lady has given birth to a baby, doesn't deplete her, doesn't make her lose her identity. Similarly, Krishna in the Supreme World, he is there, he is giving birth to all these souls, he doesn't lose his identity. And the baby, once out of the body of a mother, you can't really go and attach. At death, what happens? You go with your journey, mother will actually die usually before the kid. So Prabhupada uses this example to say, Krishna is, we as soul is part and parcel of Krishna. Mayavada means to understand soul is part of Krishna. So if we understand this difference, we understand what Maya philosophy is. Okay, which means there is a dependence aspect of Krishna on the souls according to Maya. As I said, remember this marker. We are separated. Marker also there is a certain dependence on the cap. Cap also to a certain extent for their completion, for their purnatva. To become complete, to become self-sufficient, both are interdependent. Now, by definition, God means Swarat. Swarat means one who is completely independent. That's Swarat. So, that is the definition of God, which means the living soul cannot be part of the Supreme Lord, rather can only be part and parcel. So to understand the soul is part of the Supreme Lord, that is Mayavad. To understand the soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, that is Vaishnavism. That is Bhakti Yoga. Okay, so to refute this argument, Prabhupada uses a lot of logic and reasoning. You can go through this one. There are 4 arguments Prabhupada actually gives in this one. I'll take a picture of this and I'll send you. I have marked it in mind. Somebody asked me, is it okay to mark in the books? They asked this question to Radhanath Maharaj. Actually, Gauranga Prabhu and Radhesham Prabhu, both of them, they asked. Radhesham Prabhu underlines as he writes. He's a very good caricaturist. He draws also in the books. Gauranga Prabhu doesn't underline at all. And then there was this Prema Kalaha, love fight. Is it right? No, this is wrong. So they took it to Radhanath Maharaj. Both are disciples of Radhanath Maharaj. And Radhanath Maharaj said, both are right. Because there, Gauranga Prabhu says, Maharaj, this is the body of the Supreme Lord. Because instructions are not different from Krishna. Everything that comes from Krishna, they are like an absolute platform. So, how can we scratch on it? And Radhanath Prabhu says, yes, that's exactly the point. Just like we decorate the Supreme Lord, you can decorate the book also. Both are valid. So, it's allowed. So, that's the bottom line. So, I've made some mark here. And I've also numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So, they are the 4 arguments. You can go through that. If anything is unclear, you can come back. We can discuss on the discussion on the following week. Okay? Let's move to the next one. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body, Sadhu, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. So this is the picture for this particular verse. 13. Verse 14, Krishna says, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like appearance and disappearance of summer and winter seasons. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Which means, Krishna is saying, this world is created to give pain. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. It's like somebody goes to prison and complains about the comfort there. The prison is actually built to make your life hard. By design, it is supposed to actually make our life miserable. Okay, so to make plans in a prison to enjoy, that's foolishness. So same way Krishna says, forget about enjoying in this material world. It's not going to happen. Because by design, this world is created to give us pain. So that's the point that Krishna is emphasizing. Krishna will be more explicit about that in the later chapters. But for now, Krishna is saying, happiness and distress, they are just like a passing of summer and winter seasons. If you understand this truth about this material world, then we won't get bewildered. There is a famous poem, I think by Shakespeare, All the World's a Stage. He says how this whole life is like a stage play. Each characters we come across, or rather each personalities in our lives are like the different characters on the stage. Just like we assume different roles in a stage, similarly, we also assume different positions in our lives also. However, there is 2 primary differences. We can also equate that, but there are 2 primary differences between a stage play and our real life. First one is, we are not the spectators. We are the actors in this play. Second one is, the script is very dynamic in our life, in this particular play, because the script, the story, climax is going back to Godhead. Understand? How we are going to go back, that is determined. The course that is actually charted out, that determines based on the choices we make in our life. So The choices determine what the storyline is going to be. But the climax is going to be the same, hopefully, for all of us, which is to go back to the spiritual world. However, how difficult our path is, how intertwined the path is going to be, or how simple and straightforward the path is going to be, that's totally dependent on the choices we make. Okay, so it's totally up to us whether we want an adventurous life, or we want a very bland life, or we want a really an unpredictable life. It's totally up to us. Okay, so that is that subtle difference between these two, and the similar analogy is actually also used by Kunti Maharani in her prayers to Lord Sri Krishna. She says to Krishna, you are like an expert actor who the personality behind that character of the actor hides inside that actor. So similarly, she says, just like even though you are the Supreme Lord, you come and deal with us like a cousin, nephew, but actually you are the Supreme Lord. So that's an analogy you will see that's being used. Looks like Shakespeare has plagiarized a bit, but basically that's the idea. Now, Krishna says in verse 15, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is studying both is eligible for liberation. In 14th verse, Krishna is saying, this world is meant to give you pain. There's pleasure and pain that's going to come to us like summer and winter seasons. So you please tolerate. If you tolerate, what are you going to achieve? Krishna is saying in 15th verse that you will get liberated. So that's the effect of tolerating pain and pleasure in our lives. So Krishna winds up the argument to Arjuna in this particular verse saying, so you please tolerate. Yes, there's pain that's going to come to you as a result of this fighting. There's going to be pain because you're going to lose some of your dear ones. However, just to tolerate. This is how the world works. Just go with the flow. This is what Krishna says. And in the remaining 15 verses, you will see Krishna talks on different aspects of the soul. First thing is, the soul is first of all unborn. Unborn means a baby is born doesn't mean the soul of the baby is born at that point of time. Only the body of the baby is born at that point of time. For the soul, it's just one other instance of in its own journey. It's just one single chart, one single chunk of time, wherein he is just inhabiting in this particular body. Even if you take our body, we are thinking we are the only inhabitants of this body. But there are millions of living organisms that are living in our body. So this body is borrowed by many living organisms, but we are thinking only we are the owner of this body. We are only one of the many owners of this body. Even from a sheer materialistic perspective, there are worms in our body, and they are thinking, this is my body. Okay? It's the same way, there may be microbes, they are thinking, this is my body. And we are thinking, hey, this is my body. But actually, even if you take this body, likewise you can imagine this huge universe. Everyone is thinking, this is my country, this is your country, or like, this is my caste, your caste, this is my religion and your religion. But actually, none of this is permanent, none of this is ours. Everything belongs to Krishna. Krishna created this facility for us to come, inhabit, do our job, and then go for a happy climax. But then here we make plans to be comfortable, here we make plans to live here permanently. Bhagavad Gita doesn't entertain such an approach. Okay, the soul is unborn, it is eternal, it cannot be cut into pieces, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be dried. So there are so many attributes of the soul which Krishna gives in the next 15 verses. As I said, it will look repetitive, but it was given just for emphasis of the very fundamental truth about Bhagavad Gita, about our life in general, which is we are not the body, we are the soul. Okay? And then towards verse 30, if you go to verse 26, Krishna touches on atheism, because atheists, they usually don't believe in soul, they don't believe in rebirth, they don't believe in reincarnation, anything. Krishna says, even in that sense, if however you think, this is verse 26, if however you think that the soul will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. Why? In the next verse he is saying, One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Krishna is saying, even if you think by killing a person, you are actually killing the soul, and the soul is going to be dead, still what can you do? You still can't control it, because change is the only constant thing in this world. Still there is no reason to lament here. So that's how Krishna addresses Arjuna's concerns here. Now, we touched on this one last week, how Bhagavad Gita, I'll touch on this one before we go to mind, intelligence and ego. We saw how for any real life situation, you apply philosophy, now Bhakti Yoga, and you arrive at a universal solution. And we were discussing this example wherein here Arjuna is fight or no fight. To fight or not to fight. And then Krishna gives Gita. And finally Arjuna's illusion is dispelled. And Arjuna not only is convinced that he would fight, but he's actually saying, I can do whatever you ask me to. So not just that particular real life situation was addressed, but in general, because of this transformation of his heart, by following the instructions of Gita, he attained a position wherein he is ready to change his priorities in his life. He is ready to focus on his eternal life rather than just a temporary relationship which he has with some of the warriors in the opposite side. Now, we were discussing how if we don't understand Gita in a proper perspective, then we won't be able to gain the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. We are also saying, you may have some questions, you may think of some situations, you will go pick a verse, and then you take it, you will understand it. So it will also sit as yet another chunk of facts in one part of our memory. But when it comes to application, that's where we fumble. So what is the best way to approach Gita? As an intellectual pursuit, yes, that's one way of doing it. From a devotional perspective, yes, that's another way of doing it. Like all of us know, even without studying Gita, we know we have to follow 4 regulative principles, chant 16 rounds, do devotional service, everything. We are all still able to do. So do we really need Gita? So that's the first question we should ask ourselves. Second thing is, if we really need Gita, what more can Gita teach us more than what we know already? Like we know, practically whatever that I actually said, I didn't say anything new. Maybe I presented it slightly differently. We know we are not the body, we are the soul. We know about it. We know the soul is unborn, eternal, everything we know. But what is it that's different? Why did Prabhupada spend so much time translating? If something is so simple, why did Prabhupada give such a range of books? If the instruction is so simple, why is Krishna using 700 verses to say the whole thing over and over again? Why was 1 billion verses scripted by Vyasadeva in the entire Vedic scriptures? Just to say you are not the body, you are the soul? Definitely not. Which means there is something more which the scriptures are actually asking us to obtain, asking us to receive, asking us to pay attention to, which we are comfortably putting aside, casting aside. If you let us take the mood of Arjuna in the first chapter, Arjuna's mood is, I will not fight. Why? Because I will feel very bad, because it's going to put people in difficulties, because I'm going to lose my near and dear ones. All the reasons he actually gives. All of these reasons, they are based on his primary misconception, which is, I'm the body. Now, then he goes, surrenders to Krishna. Krishna says, okay, you are not the body. You are. Now, we also know that. Correct? But if somebody brings a bowl of gulab jamun, you won't see me here. What happened to that knowledge? Or there are many instances also you will come across devotees having doubts in their faith, fundamental faith in the practice of Krishna consciousness? Why is my life becoming more difficult? Why am I getting more disturbed after practicing Krishna consciousness? We compromise on our vows, we compromise on our practice of these four regulative principles, we compromise on practically our life, our priorities, everything. We go from one end to the other also, to the extreme of materialistic exploitation also we go. Why is it? Because knowledge is one thing, wisdom is another. Knowledge in general means that I can be myself. I can have my own misconceptions, I can have my own priorities, I can have my own personal life. I can still gather some facts, but I don't need to change my opinion. I don't need to change, I don't need to take it to my heart, I don't need to transform myself with those facts. I may know. Now if you approach Bhagavad Gita knowing, yeah, I know I'm the soul, there are 18 chapters in it, I know what Karma Yoga is, I know what Jnana Yoga is, I know what Ashtanga Bhakti Yoga, so on and so forth. Everything is, then this knowledge which we actually study in Bhagavad Gita will come and they will deposit in our memory as mere facts. They won't transform us. They won't bring any change in us. Now, even in instance, as I said last week, when Arjuna says he won't fight, he hears Gita and finally he comes to the conclusion, okay, I'll fight. Okay, now he fights, he loses, let's say, one person, one of his relatives in doing the war. Now, what is he going to go through now? If only Arjuna had accepted this knowledge of Gita on a factual basis, he would go into illusion again. That's why when we approach Gita, we should approach Gita in the mode of Arjuna, wherein he's saying, I have my preconceived notions, that may be true, but I am coming to you and I am willing to take whatever knowledge you actually give me. I'll take that and then I'm going to add it as part of my value system, which means that rather than intellectually knowing whatever knowledge you have actually given, I'm going to take the step to apply this in my day-to-day life. I'm going to take this to follow really in my day-to-day life. I'm going to use this knowledge to transform myself. I'm going to use this knowledge to change my misconceptions. Like all of the questions in Arjuna's, which Arjuna uttered in chapter 1, they are all based on his misconception, which is I am the body. Now the knowledge which he is actually getting, and based on that he shot a lot of questions. Now interestingly, if you see how Krishna addresses these questions, he doesn't address there. He addresses here. Correct? Arjuna is saying, I won't fight. So this all of his questions is based on, I won't fight. Krishna, rather than telling, no, you should fight, Krishna penetrates through those questions and comes to this misconception. And he's addressing this misconception. Okay, he's shaking his foundation here, reprogramming him here. And then Arjuna is saying, okay, based on this particular knowledge, you are the soul. Then Arjuna is saying, okay. So his questions is not answered technically. Arjuna is actually taught to address the foundation of those questions. In other words, Krishna is teaching Arjuna to question those questions. Based on what are you asking the question? Well, based on the understanding that I am the body. Krishna is saying, okay, so let's address that issue first. That's why Krishna is coming here and he is addressing here. So that's the technique we are supposed to follow. Getting questions is one thing. There's nothing so great about getting questions. But the technique with which we have to approach Bhagavad Gita is, okay, I have this question. What did Arjuna say here? That's not the approach for us to follow. The approach to follow Bhagavad Gita, the approach to study Bhagavad Gita is, if I think, okay, maybe I can enjoy it. Okay, forget about it. I'll compromise on one of the regulative principles. Let us say this is, why can't I compromise on one of the regulative principles? Let's take that one. Now the question we should ask is not superficially hovering on why should I or why shouldn't I? Oh, I promised, I did this. I may get bad name if I actually break all of that. They are okay. They are a very superficial way of addressing those issues. But something which is much more deeper is to question ourselves, why am I thinking like this? What is making me to think that I can enjoy? What is making me behave this way? So if we start to question our questions, then you will be able to access the full wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. So in which case you won't just address the superficial questions, rather the foundation of those questions. Now unless we uproot that foundation, that misconception, the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita will evade us. Okay, that's the technique which Krishna teaches Arjuna here. And this is the way to approach Bhagavad Gita. So rather than thinking, I know everything, why can't we enjoy? Like, people ask, if there is God, show me God. Why can't you show God? So to address such a question is, go to their conception. They are thinking, God is just like yet another mortal in this world. Why can't I see Him? So then we have to go address that misconception, which is to understand, make the person understand, God is not an ordinary person. That's where we should make him realize. God's body is not similar to ours. We change body, God doesn't change. We can see anybody, whoever we want to, as long as we see, we are in a certain range. But God is beyond the range of our senses. That's the way to address it. Sometimes even devotees who give classes, they ask, what's the best way to answer the question? I always say, if your question is asked, keep hearing the question. And as the person speaks, give yourself time to actually understand each and every word. At one point you can actually catch the misconception. It applies to any question you can throw. I can tell you exactly where the conception is wrong. Once you catch that, then you can give an absolute answer. You won't get any counter question back. Now this is if you deal with another person. But the same approach we have to take even for ourselves. It's little philosophical, but if you learn this, wisdom is yours. If you approach Bhagavad Gita, if you approach Srimad Bhagavatam, one primary conception we go with this, I am right. So we need to doubt our mind, we need to doubt our questions, understanding, is it in line with the scriptures? No. What is making me to think like this? If you go slightly deeper like that, most of the questions you yourself will be able to answer. That is the technique. Now if you go with, why am I not able to actually do this, or why am I thinking like this? Now you open Bhagavad Gita to actually find answer, you will catch it straight away. Once you catch the technique, the knowledge is yours. That's how we are supposed to approach Gita. Otherwise, currently our way of approaching is exactly like this. I won't fight. Okay? So rather than our analysis is starting from here, it's starting from there, the questions. And then we go to Bhagavad Gita will tell us something and we are answered there. We are just hovering back and forth between those two. So, and because we are not allowing wisdom of Gita to come here, we don't find much transformation in us. So, our knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, unfortunately, gets confined within the realm of just knowledge. Okay, so any doubts we get start based on what am I asking that? Because we know all this knowledge already. We have heard enough, we are already equipped, we have enough ammunition in our armory. We can actually ask. Once we do that, we will understand this. Okay, and in Arjuna's approach, we can clearly see how he had a material problem, but he went and approached Krishna. We were discussing about this example in Bhagavatam class a couple of days ago. Like, I'll give an example which Prabhupada actually explains in Krishna book. In Krishna book, we all know the story of Krishna killing Kaliya. Now, in Kaliya's pastime, not killing, subduing Kaliya. The original issue was in Yamuna, there were some fishes. Yamuna river, there were some fishes, and the fishes went and complained to Shaubari Muni that they are scared of Garuda because Garuda is coming and eating them up. So they didn't know what to do with that situation. So they go and approach Shaubari, and Shaubari Muni, because the fishes have taken his shelter, he pronounces this curse on Garuda. If you ever come to this lake of Yamuna, and if you eat on the fishes, I curse you that you will die. Now Garuda, even though he is the transcendental carrier, he's immune to all of these curses, and yet, simply to respect the words of a sage, he didn't come. He stays away. Now elsewhere what happens? Garuda and Kalya, they fought with each other. Garuda has already subdued Kalya. And Kalya, being afraid of Garuda, that he's going to kill me, he swims and he takes shelter of Yamuna. Because Kalya knows that Yamuna is the place where he can get immunity from even Garuda. So Kalya came here. And you have the fishes and you have Yamuna. So what was the original problem here? Original problem was Garuda eating fishes. Okay, so that's the problem. And what was the material solution that's given by Shaubhari Muni? Curse. Now we will see the effect of this material solution to material problem. This is a material problem and he gives a material solution, which is, I'll curse you, don't come here. Now you look at the effect of that. There's a domino effect because of that curse. Because of that curse, Kalya came to Yamuna. He pollutes Yamuna, infesting Yamuna with his venom, thereby killing the same fishes. Not only that, the same guy who wanted to protect the fishes, he goes underwater to do tapasya. He sees fishes copulating, he falls down. Yamuna is polluted. Not only Yamuna, all the trees, all the birds, practically anyone in that whole vicinity, everyone got affected. And the problem still remains the same, which is Garuda eating fishes. If he actually had wanted, he could have come and eaten here. And now enters our hero. Who is that? Sri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai. Now he jumps into Yamuna. And it's mentioned as soon as he jumps into Yamuna, Yamuna overfloods the bank by 100 yards, Prabhupada says. Very uncommon. He jumps into Yamuna, subdues Kalya. So Kalya is subdued. Now why did Kalya come here? Because he was fearful of Garuda. So Krishna, when he danced on Kalya, he left his footprint on the hooves of Kalya. So Kalya is now free. And he is free to roam about, and Krishna gives him the promise. As soon as Garuda sees my footprint on your head, he is not going to affect you. So then he drives him to Fiji. So Kalya goes to Fiji. Prabhupada says that. So Kalya problem is over. He jumps into Yamuna and then he purifies the water of Yamuna. Fishes are brought back to life. Trees, birds, everything in that vicinity, they regain back their life. Now what happened to Shaubhari Muni? When he comes out, he sees the fishes populating, he falls down from his sagehood, comes out, marries the 50 daughters of Mandata, and then he enjoys. Then after some time, he actually comes to senses and he thinks, hey, I went to the forest of Vrindavan to perfect my life. How did I get entangled? Then he realizes the actual thing he did for Garuda was not a curse, it was an offense. And then Shaubhari, he is the only one who is left out. So then what he does, he takes to devotional service. He takes all his wife, goes to forest again, practices devotional service in Vanaprastha ashram. And guess what? At the end of the life, he goes back to Godhead. Sri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai. So for that one single, and then Krishna gives permission again to Garuda. You can eat anything anywhere. So material solution to actually address a material problem, it actually caused to the downfall of everyone. Every single personality who's involved here, each one of them, they were affected. Whereas you bring in Radha Gopinath inside, you bring in the chanting of the Hare Krishna inside, everyone benefits. Yamuna is purified, trees, birds, they regain their life. Shaubhari Muni, by taking up devotional service, he also goes back to Godhead. Kalya, he is free from his fear of death, goes to Fiji. Prabhupada says he still remains there. And then the fishes, they regain their life because water is purified again. And they don't need to fear Kalya, they don't need to fear Garuda. They understand this is the way of life and they just continue. Matra spashas they we learn to tolerate. So they also learn to tolerate. So that is the approach with which we should accept the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, if we simply go, be satisfied with that philosophical exercise, trust me, it will be boring. How many of you felt at some point reading Bhagavad Gita is boring because there are no stories? But actually, it's very exciting. Krishna, he's like all the energy comes out of him. How can boredom come out of him? Impossible. That is the proof. That's why we were discussing, right? When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, he says Krishna or Rupa Goswami sings, I don't know how much nectar If somebody says, Prabhu, here is the nectar, let me sleep, we don't say that. We run towards the nectar and we jump in. Right? But if we sleep, when we chant Hare Krishna also, when we open the book also, still, Krishna still gives us the mercy. I'll tell you a story in Ramayana. Once Hanuman goes and, one Brahmana in Ayodhya, he goes and asks Hanuman, Hanumanji, I heard Lord Ram is maintaining a book with a list of all special devotees' names. Then Hanuman says, yeah, that's true. Can I have access to the book? Then Hanuman says, all right, you are a Brahmana, I'll give you. So then he goes to Lord Ram, asks for the book. Lord Ram gives it to Brahmana. What would you do if you get that? You look for your name there. And that's what Brahmana also did. He went through and he was like very happy. Yes, my name is there. Satisfied. And then he goes searching. Much to his surprise, he doesn't see Hanuman's name in it. So Brahmana feels very sad. He goes to Hanuman and he gives it to him. He says, I'm satisfied, my name is there, but sorry to tell you, your name isn't. Then Hanuman replies, well, Lord Ram is having another book. Really? Then, can I have access? He said, like, well, it's been difficult, but I'll try. So he goes, and then he asks Lord Ram, give me the other one. And then Lord Ram gives him. It's a very small book. And then he gives it to the Brahmana. Brahmana opens the book and he sees the Hanuman's name there. Much to his surprise, the book size is very small. And his name wasn't there. Now Brahmana gets confused. So he goes to Hanuman and he asks, what is this one? Then he says, first book is the name of all devotees who remember Lord Ram always. The smaller one is the name of all devotees who Lord Ram remembers always. So, reason for me telling you is, thank you so much for coming. Sure, my prayers is that Gopinath is maintaining all of your names in his small book. The second one. So, thank you so much for coming regularly. Thank you so much for all your encouragement and inspiration, for all your encouraging messages. Some devotees ask, can we record the classes? You can, it's already recorded in Mayapur TV. But, if you are a Hare Krishna for 14, 15 years, you know clearly how your mind works and you know clearly how the general psychology is. How many of you have experience of recording a lecture and completely lost track of it? Most of us. And the reason is, we think, we attend one lecture and we think, okay, I'll come back, I'll listen next week. But by that time, every day there's like another 4-5 classes. There are always more inspiring classes. And we get lost. So, we should not, our mind is like a repeat movie. We'll talk about the nature of mind in 6th chapter. So, we should not get cheated thinking, I will make some time and I will do later. Whatever time we have, just do it then and there. Some devotees ask me the question, we take notes, you have given us the booklets, there's book, there is some study guide also, how are we supposed to read? Many times, having more help is actually very distressing. You get confused also, and it's rather than enhancing our reading experience, it confuses us more. So I usually say, go through your notes before reading and read Prabhupada's books just for the pleasure of it. How much you can remember, you don't need to bother about it. That's why we say there's no test, you don't need to memorize anything. There is a pleasure inherent in reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Just take that habit, just read that, then you can be happy. We can be blissful. Okay, any questions? We'll start with Sumedha Gauranga Prabhu. All clear. Okay, anyone else? Yes. Chant any mantras.
Mahamantra is
correct.
better than any other mantra.
Correct. Mahamantra we can. Like even in ISKCON also, second initiated devotees, we are given Gayatri mantra. We don't chant it out loud. We chant it in mind. So the mantras which are mentioned here are Yajna mantras. Mahamantras anybody can chant, obviously. Okay, holy name of the Lord is open for everyone, but Yajna mantra, Gayatri mantras, or anything specific to Yajna mantras, they should chant. Okay, because something has to be able to chant that, there has to be a certain level of lifestyle, a certain level of purity that's required. And the importance, if you read Puranic stories, you'll actually see they always talk to each other in using analogies and similes. hey, what happened to your face? It looks, it has lost its luster. Like the mood of a lover who's abandoned by its beloved. They use examples like that. Or like the state of a Brahmana who forgot to chant his Gayatri. Sometimes when I read that, I feel scared. Oh, I should chant it properly. So all those analogies are given. The importance of reading Gayatri mantra is given. The qualification to be able to chant that mantra is also given. That's why Maha Mantra is super merciful. Anybody can chant. Rule number 1, there is no rule. Anybody can do that. Nandan Prabhu.
Thank you, Lord. So when Krishna says that neither there was a time where we did not exist or cease to exist, does that basically, like it's the same as a blade of grass does not exist without Krishna willing that to exist?
Yeah.
Does that essentially guarantee our existence forever?
Definitely, definitely. What makes us think that we won't exist? Whereas there are a lot of proofs to actually understand. Prabhupada uses a lot of common sense logic to understand that we do exist. One of the proof is, so we don't have any experience in this life of us losing ourselves. Okay, unless like somebody goes through really some mental issue, usually we carry the same memories, we still feel the same person that we are. Okay, the general emotions may actually change. Good point you're raising. Generally, subtle body, as I said, there is mind, there is intelligence, and there is ego. We'll discuss this in the 6th chapter. I couldn't spend more time on this. Mind, the product of mind is called emotions. The product of intelligence is called thoughts. Usually, there's no reason for you to feel a certain way. It's emotion, it's more spontaneous. Whereas the intelligence is a bit more rational. You can gather your thoughts, you can direct your thoughts, you can guide your thoughts in a certain way. Okay, whereas emotions you can't really. You can try to repulse it on something, but it won't be spontaneous. You can't really force. In fact, it's for the same reason why Krishna is not forcing us to love him. Nobody can actually force us. Okay? Which means the emotions is also passing. I can sit right at this time, 11:30, and I can say, actually morning I felt something different. That's the proof I'm different from my emotion. Okay, we saw changing body. Similarly, with that analysis, we can conclude we are also not the mind, intelligence and false ego. Because my thoughts also change. As my knowledge grows, my thoughts also change, which means, but I can still pull myself out and I can say, actually morning I felt that way, which means I'm not the same person now in terms of emotions. However, I still feel the same person that I am in terms of my identity. So in every sense, be it body, be it gross or subtle, in our experience with common sense, we can actually understand that I'm still the same person. Now what happens exactly after death? There is a certain experience that we will actually get as we practice Krishna consciousness. We usually call that realization. Realization means the question you have. Some questions has to be experienced. There's only so much intelligence can actually reach. There's only so much you can actually understand conceptually. Correct? But that's why we use the word realizations. Realization means you have a question and you didn't know how to conclude an answer for that question. However, you go through a certain experience that will actually make you come to a proper conclusion, so that the question no longer exists. That is realization. That comes through devotional practice. That comes through chanting Hare Krishna. Prabhupada gives this beautiful analogy. Many times when we think self-realization means, normally we tend to think we have to sit cross-legged, we have to go deep inside us to realize soul. But Prabhupada uses this beautiful analogy. Prabhupada says, early in the morning in eastern horizon you have the sun. Okay, now sun is Krishna. And here we are, Nandan standing there. Now and you are in darkness, we are all in darkness. Right? Now as soon as Krishna's sun comes up, Prabhupada says everything becomes clear. Sun becomes clear, and so is our body and everything around us. Whereas if you ignore Krishna, just in the darkness, even if you want to see, you can't see. So Prabhupada is saying, the process of Krishna consciousness is very simple. Simply do chanting, simply do devotional service to Krishna, and allow Krishna to arise in your heart. Naturally we will understand who we are, because that light is going to actually illuminate our identity as well. But to search for ourselves in the dark is extremely hard. It's impossible. So even though it may look like we are just discussing some simple philosophy here, even though it may feel like we are just discussing some stories or coming to darshan, eating some prasad, they are all our attempt to do devotional service to allow Krishna rise in our heart. What is simultaneously happening which we can't understand, just like how a growing baby can't understand that it's growing. What we can't understand is the sun as it actually rises, our body is also getting illuminated. It's just a matter of time before we start to look like, hey, this is how I look. But we don't need a separate endeavor for that. Simply hearing and chanting following for regulative principles is enough. The very word Acharya we use for Prabhupada has got two meanings. And Prabhupada was a true Acharya in both the senses. One meaning of the word Acharya is one who leads by example. Another meaning is one who teaches complex philosophical truths using simple examples. Okay, that's why you will see there are a lot of analogies in Prabhupada's conversation, in Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada's letters, you will see all of that. So these examples actually allow us to understand the philosophy in a much more deeper sense. And it breaks down any complicated level of philosophy into something very, very simple, which even a child can understand. Okay? Sorry, as usual, I'm 5 minutes over time. Thank you very much.
Just one more question.
Yes.
What's the product of ego?
What is the product of ego? Misidentification. Okay, wrong conceptions. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki, Samaved Gaur Bhakta ki, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki, Jayanta Gaur Pramanande, Mande,